Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
What is the day today?
Yeah, I
It
was
is,
gonna say you're
it
slow
is,
on the uptake with the date. I was
it is
like
August
waiting.
7th, 2020. It's like there's a browser window covering my little clock in the corner. So,
There you
and
go.
this is episode 83. And I'm Mark Van Steenwick. I'm the director of the Center for Prophetic Imagination.
And I'm Danny Walpert. I direct Micah. Got my Micah t-shirt on today.
Oh,
So the Institute of Contemplation and Healing.
I need to get a CPI t-shirt so that I don't feel like a loser.
There you go.
Or I can just get a hat. A hat maybe is more my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mark and I have found maybe our one greatest area of disagreement,
It's
which
to
is
the point
over
of
pumpkin spice.
there's
Pumpkin
enmity.
spice. There's deep enmity.
Yeah, because today was the first day Caribou Coffee launched its pumpkin spice today, and I'm all for it because I like the flavor. I like fall, and then this is the only time of year where it's Dune references just get cranked out into overtime, and I love that. I love them.
Yeah, so I love Dune and fall, and I would say probably the worst thing about fall in America is pumpkin spice. And we've got pumpkin spice every place I go. And that might be one good thing about COVID is I don't go to all these places now that will try to get me to eat pumpkin spice, hamburgers.
They're going to find that combination of spices cures COVID.
That's right. That's right. Maybe pumpkin spice will end up curing COVID. Then I will like it.
Then all you haters can die. All you haters can die while all of us pumpkin spice. I even have my own recipe for making pumpkin spice at home that I've perfected. But another time.
All right, let's move on.
We're talking about the pumpkin spice of politics, that is fascism. Some people hate it, but other people love it, apparently. So.
That's right. But first, we're gonna get audience participation, right?
Oh yeah. A new potential promo. Let's get this business out of the way. Low res, but let me know what you think. Okay. Okay. Let's play this.
Definitely need music to go with this, but there we go.
I think that carries the gravity and power of.
Oh yes, I've got one person on my side. Connie says pumpkin spice should stay in pumpkin pie. Amen, sister.
You guys are solidists. You just don't like your pumpkin spice. You want it in solid things, but not wet things, and I find that very bigoted, narrow-minded.
No, I just want it in pumpkin things.
Some of the pumpkin spice lattes actually have little bits of pumpkin in it. Oh, Jeremy Shue loves the intro.
Loves it.
Needs some work to pumpkin spice.
Okay. Yes.
Kathleen's not on board with any. With any of my stuff.
I like you guys more every second.
I quit.
Okay.
So switching to the topic at hand. So, I'm glad we were able to joke for the first, 4 minutes, because this is we're living in a shitty time. So just to lay out some things that have happened for those who maybe not paying attention, which is reasonable to not want to know all the nasty things happening in the world. But there was a man shot in the back in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is, I just found out it's closer to Milwaukee, but it's considered an exurb of Chicago. So Milwaukee and Chicago are pretty much a mega city because there's an unbroken track between the two. And so, man was shot, paralyzed. Protests ensue, just similar to what happened in Minneapolis. And then some 17-year-old white nationalist, cop-loving Trump supporter type shot up into the crowd in some sort of like vigilante-style justice, walked in with a rifle, No one checked. The cops didn't check that. They even had a conversation, gave him some water. And after he shot a few people, and two of them dead, he was allowed to leave. So there's all kinds of speculation as to why. But the thing that's shocking is GoFundMe is like people are raising money for him. There's a hashtag calling him a hero. They see this as a one man standing up to defend his community. Like, so that's gross. Meanwhile, the RNC is
including the police chief of Kenosha, who basically said, well, you know, it was the protesters' fault that they got shot.
Mm-hmm.
They were out after curfew. You know, and this kid was not by himself. There was a whole crew of heavily armed white nationalists who were there to, quote, defend property.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be the one that started firing.
Yeah, and this is after, and I understand there's political rhetoric, like, so the progressives, liberals, and of course, full-on leftists will talk about fascism and the fear we see. But on the right, they talk about socialism. So I get there's going to be a little bit of that sort of thing that happens linguistically. But for months now, we've been hearing more clearly from Trump and his administration how socialists are trying to destroy this country. I mean, that's kind of Reagan level of kind of Cold War warring. But then also the idea of Antifa invading, like Antifa is this leftist terrorist group that's invading the country. Trump has been stirring this up, white nationalist resentments. And so then you have a largely black, though not exclusively black, series of uprisings. And these people really, like in the countryside, think that Antifa is coming for them. So they're militiaing up. And Trump is doing nothing to discourage this.
Well, it's the opposite. He's encouraging it.
We saw that in Charlotte back in the day with the Tiki Torch dudes. Like, he's just only encouraged this. And so these deaths that we're seeing are happening in the midst of protests, are happening more and more from white nationalists trying to incite things. And it's terrifying. We're in a very terrifying moment. Of course, there's a pandemic and double hurricanes. Fires. So we're really in a point where economic collapse is always possible, which we know that you can, like when people start being really afraid for their livelihood, then the soft nature of imperialism erodes, and then you get more hard imperialism.
Yeah. And, you know, and as we've watched, well, I can't say I've watched much of it, but as we have followed the Republican convention, you know, we see a very typical tactic of authoritarian right-wing governments, right, where we have the great leader and his family will take care of you. Right? And you know, we have never had a situation before where a presidential candidate has paraded all of his children, his you know, in-laws, his kids' girlfriends. I mean, the web of nepotism is so vast before the audience, all basically saying, just, your great leader is great, and he's nice, and he loves you, and he will take care of you. And the fact that this is all happening with the White House as a backdrop, which first of all is illegal, but of course, you know, there's no way to stop this audacity, and so the symbolism is, you know, the symbolism is, this is our house, this is your great leader's house, and it is your house, and we care about you. Yeah, and Kathleen comments, you know, you've got this white couple from Missouri who were pointing guns at all the protesters. Right now they're facing felony charges, which will either probably be dismissed or, you know, or Trump will pardon them at some point. And so they get to speak at the convention, you know, about defending property and, you know, how important this is. And, yeah, so these are all the hallmarks of an authoritarian government. And again, I'm gonna, even though I'm not getting a cut from Amazon for this, If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. This is a Turkish woman. She's an activist, a poet, a writer. She has been forced to flee the country. And she basically lays out these steps. And it's quite remarkable to read this because we're really seeing every one of these steps unfold. I think we're on about step 5 right now. And we're seeing all these things unfold in real time right before our eyes.
Just to get to some comments and to shift to the more important conversation at hand. Of course, Connie agrees that pumpkin spice should stay in pumpkin pie. Kathleen said no to pumpkin spice. But Gus, good Gus, said he's with me on the pumpkin spice situation, Dan.
Yeah. So Gus, you can't come on the show tomorrow. Sorry.
I just
we had to change our plans.
Transmission to 2.
It'll be 2 against 1.
CK is betraying me here, saying Mark Vince, you leave Muad'Dib out of your pumpkin spice fantasy.
Thank you, CK.
The spice must flow. And now to serious things. So this is interesting. Like, there's always different narratives around what happens. Mm-hmm. So Jeremy writes, my conservative Facebook feed folks show a video of this kid being attacked and having a gun drawn on him when he shot the protesters. Is this legit? If so, does it change the narrative at all? Amy, my partner, responds, that happened after he shot a person who died. He fled and a few people chased him down and almost managed to get his gun before he fired them as well. Which that's my understanding of what happened. But even if he went into he traveled to the protests with a rifle out defiantly, wanting to stand up as a vigilante against these protesters. So
right.
I mean, it's funny to me, like, how we're so willing to accept that a police officer could be afraid for someone reaching into a car and enough to kill someone, shoot him in the back. But the idea of, like, if you're a protester and some white dude walks up to you with a gun and starts yelling at you, like, even if they did fire on him, then why wouldn't that be self-defense? That's always the question.
Well, and
it's much more cut and dry than that.
Yeah, and again, this was not one kid who, by the way, was driven there across state lines by his mother. Right, so people are not born racists. People are trained in this. So he's driven up there by his mother to a town that is not his town, to property that is not his property, to place himself in this kind of position. And he and his compatriots are basically welcomed by the police. And we've seen this in several other places and situations across the country. I mean, these militias took over the Michigan State House. I mean, they literally shut down the Michigan government. They were not met with tear gas, rubber bullets, tanks, the National Guard. The other day, a group of them took over the Idaho State House. Came in to protest the mask COVID regulations, literally pushed through the state police lines, unmasked, heavily armed, and were then given seats in the gallery. Again, they were not gassed, they were not rubber bulleted, they were not met with tanks. And so what we see is that this group of right wingers, and by the way, a lot of people say, oh, Trump isn't inciting this. These people say that Trump is supporting them. I mean, you don't need to take our word for it. You can go to their website and the discussion boards on 4chan and all these places, and they say, we have a friend in the White House. I mean, so they are very clear that Trump is supporting them in their cause. And having a set of potentially right-wing death squads at your disposal is another one of the very well-known techniques of right-wing authoritarian governments.
Yes.
Many of which we have installed actually in Central and South America. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that there are wings of our government and people in our government who understand this exactly because they've done it.
Yeah. And just for larger context, so this Kenosha is a microcosm of what's happening in a larger sense. Like, so in Minneapolis last night, the police were pursuing someone who then committed suicide. And so there's confusion early on whether or not he was killed by the police, and they were lying about it. So then within a couple hours, they released the video, which they don't usually do unless it's in their benefit, which is telling. And people are protesting and rioting, uprising, whatever words you want to use, downtown Minneapolis. And, you know, already it's being spun like, you know, this guy committed suicide, so you shouldn't be upset at the police. Well, there's a reason he committed suicide instead of being caught by the police. There's a lot of despair. The National Guard was already waiting in the wings, so it didn't take any time for them to be activated at all. And so we're seeing this escalation of this willingness to call in the National Guard, to escalate tactics. And so now this is by Democratic government in Minnesota, but it still works in concert with this larger trend. So this is the disturbing thing. It's like, as people push against authoritarianism, Trumpian style authoritarianism, neo-fascism, you're going to see neoliberals trying to protect property more than, so it leans into this fascist tendency. So we have to be really careful. This is why we're talking about this. What does it mean to do resistance well? How do we understand things? And simply saying, well, you know, let's go back to the way things were before. Neoliberalism lays the groundwork for fascism. Because at a certain point, once things aren't, you don't have enough of a buffer of a middle class, or people start to become anxious, you have to start nakedly asserting power instead of passively asserting more economic power. This is what happened in Germany when the economy tanked. You have a rise of fascism. It's not that somehow people suddenly became more racist. It was just there, but now they had to expose it more. So this is important to pay attention to what's happening now.
Yeah, and this whole business of we care more about property than people is something that I just feel like we need to keep hammering on, because, you know, I can't tell you the number of hand-wringing, pearl-clutching, white fragility bullshit that I'm continually hearing about. Oh, well, if these people just wouldn't burn down a building and they would just march through the street, I would support them. Well, first of all, that's not true, because people have been marching through the street peacefully now for years in Minneapolis specifically, and in other places. But I'll talk specifically about Minneapolis, for changes in the police department and in policing in Minneapolis, and absolutely nothing has happened. And, you know, these white folks who think of themselves as progressives and anti-racists and liberals have done nothing to put political pressure on, you know. And again, there was another march the other day, you know, and I posted on Facebook, where the hell were all these people, you know, in these progressive churches? Nowhere to be found. And then I put that on Facebook, and of course, then immediately I've got all these people from these communities, you know, getting mad and having their feelings hurt because, you know, I called them out. But the big focus, you know, neoliberalism is another one of these words that gets thrown around, used a lot, and so it gets confusing. But one of the main aspects of it is that it is committed to the rise of global capitalism, right? And the use of global capitalism as a means for, quote, economic advancement. And of course, the primary focus of capitalism is property, right? You have to have private property, you have to have capital property, and that is what is most important, way more important than human beings. And we need to get that's again the soup that we're swimming in. And so, right, so as soon as one piece of property gets destroyed, the white left just flees. It's just gone. Like, there's suddenly no support for any of this. We need to really look at that, because that's obscene.
It's one of the few things that is collectively held to be sacred in the United States, well, in the world, but like in a neoliberal Western style society. And so that's the thing that offends the most when it gets destroyed. And people know better. Like, we know better than to say, oh, I think property is more important than human lives. People don't really usually come out and say that.
Well, no,
but their actions,
that would be impolite.
would be uncivil of them.
Uncivil.
Some comments.
Right. Yep.
So this is a good point, Kathleen. Trump knew exactly what he was doing, featuring the white couple from Missouri who pointed guns at protesters. Again, people that are lionized by the right wing. Marie asked for a link to the book, and Laura provides it here.
Thank you, Laura.
I don't know which part of the feed that's on, but if you look at either the CPI page, the MICA page, or the transmission page, it'll probably be one of those places. Yeah. Again, by the author. How do you pronounce this name, Dan? Do you know?
Ek Temilkuran.
Ek Temilkuran.
Like EK.
Nice
first name. Yeah.
Laura writes, yes, heavily armed white people have been given a huge pass. Can you imagine a black man with a rifle being taken alive in the turmoil of Kenosha?
Yeah. We see this happen all the time, right? I mean, the shooter at the church in Charleston, the cops took him out for lunch on their way to jail, right? When there was the huge gathering of militias down in Texas and a bunch of people got arrested, they all got arrested without getting hurt or shot or anything. Gregory, who's been on the show, posted this video the other day of this white guy, like basically attacking this woman cop, and she allows him to berate her for literally a couple of minutes and kind of chase her around this car before she finally, shoots him in the leg to debilitate him. I mean, this is a very, very obvious trend. It's a very, very obvious trend.
Connie writes, nationalism is not patriotism. It is a perversion of patriotism, and yet they are held up as patriots. I wouldn't consider myself either, but the way I'm understanding you is patriotism is love of country. Nationalism is believing in the supremacy of your country, particularly like an ethnic group within that. And they're very different. And it's disturbing how they become equated to so many people. CK writes, it's funny how after Mayor Fry's speech about police tactics, the Minneapolis police, state troopers, SWAT, gang task force all showed up a few blocks from her house and were brutalizing people of color. It's just lip service.
No.
Julie writes, we worship property.
No.
I mean, it's the American civil religion. CK, you can't burn down the slave master's house. Full stop.
Yeah. Another great comment I saw recently connected to that was that the 1840s neoliberalism solution to slavery would be to just have more black slave masters.
Oof. I mean, that's a bigger conversation around abolition. It's like the way we talk about police abolition now, like being like, well, we need to reform it. There were all kinds of slavery reform movements.
Oh yeah.
People act like it was just like a bunch of like super like stereotypical villainous mustachioed slave owners who are like, I hate them all and I want them all to die or serve me. And then like nice white people in the North who were like, no, we need to set them free. And then all of a sudden, boom, it happened. Like they were all the same sort of tendencies that we have now at play. Like, don't be too hasty. It's going to ruin the economy. Like all that stuff.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, Frederick Douglass wrote about this a lot, that there were liberal folks that were very much not in favor of abolishing slavery because they thought it would destroy the economy of the United States. And, he was furious at them. So, yeah, I mean, and it's the way that we rewrite history of how these things happen. you know, how we've talked about how now everybody thinks that, you know, Martin Luther King just showed up, walked down the street singing Kumbaya, and all the white people cheered, and we got the Civil Rights Act. Like, you know, that's not what happened. And there was an incredible amount of disruption and violence, mostly perpetrated by white people against black people. You know, and it's the same thing with the issue of uprising. You know, many folks, I think, who watch this or part of this, you know, were not alive or very aware in the summer of 1968. But these things didn't just happen like once for a week and then stop. And these kinds of uprisings went on for months. And the protests against the war in particular went on for several years. You know, this sense that, oh my gosh, this is happening again in Minneapolis, or this is happening again in another city. Yeah, it's going to keep happening. And this is one of the reasons why the authoritarian right is rising the way that it is. It is going to keep happening until either there is change or you know, what the right wants is a full-fledged authoritarian takeover, militarized takeover, to try to quell or put this down.
Jeff writes, Amy, please share the source for that information. That's the video, kind of the fuller video, in order to counter the other narrative. And has that been verified? In these times, it's so important that truth come forth and can be verified. Yeah, if anybody wants to share the link to that, that'd be good. Connie writes, there was a woman interviewed in the face of the hurricane who would not evacuate because she could not leave her property behind to go to safety for her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we actually hear about that all the time in hurricanes. I mean, that's kind of a great example. People will talk about that all the time, like, I can't leave my property, as if somehow them being present in their house during a hurricane is going to help. I don't understand. They're holding the walls up or something. I don't quite get that, but
the anxiety is understandable because, like, in our society, no one will take care of you. You might get Social Security, but it's not going to be enough. And so owning property is one of the few ways that you can have any semblance of security, although it doesn't always work out that way either.
Yeah.
So, Gus writes, there's another reason we're never going back after Trump, and that's the loss of all sorts of flimsy supports of the norms that undergird laws and institutions. Talking about courts is illegitimate, having government agents participate in political rallies, etc. These things are not weird anymore. They're on the table for next presidents. That's right. Like a whole set of taboos, which at least when they were broken secretly, are now broken.
Yeah.
So what it does is it makes it easier just to be flagrant about stuff, and more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say about that is that many of those things, you know, have been going on for a long time, in secret and sometimes not secret ways. But yeah, I mean, you know, and this is one of the steps, the 7 steps that Eck talks about, is that one of the things that right-wing authoritarianists do is they attack the institutions of the country as being illegitimate. And they, you know, and we saw this again, you know, Tiffany Trump's speech the other night was basically this entire thing. Like, all these institutions are fake. They're telling you the false narrative. They're lying to you. Of course, the reality is that Trump and his ilk are lying to us. But what you do is you undermine confidence in all those institutions, so that the only thing you're confident in is the great leader. And yeah, and that's that then sets the stage for a real authoritarian kind of takeover.
That's right.
CK's got a great question here.
Why does any kind of meaningful change demand blood sacrifice?
Yeah. Well, because people don't want to change. I mean, that's the thing about the individual and collective ego. You know, it's the same way that alcoholics won't change until they hit bottom. I mean, you know, our ego process is incredibly powerful, and it wants to hold on to its existence kind of at all costs. And so, you know, something's got to break in order for there to be some sort of transformation. And that's a very painful reality, because there's always an incredible amount of suffering that goes along with change and transformation. But it, unfortunately, it's kind of the way us humans are. Not enough people are engaged in spiritual life and practice.
All right. I'm not sure why we need to counter the narrative of a young man being suppressed and contained by a crowd of protesters after he just shot someone with a rifle. Isn't containing the shooter what we would hope would happen? Why don't we support a crowd, even to the point of potentially keeping an active shooter at bay by guarding him with a drawn weapon? It's interesting how that works.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, this notion of sort of getting the facts and verifying things. I mean, it's great, as anybody knows that has ever posted a fact in social media also is aware of. It doesn't necessarily help all that much. So I think that, yeah, I mean, to me, just the reality of the white militia showing up to protect property, that is the problem. What happens after that is simply some kind of sequelae to the original problem. Yeah. And you know, this is again what we're doing all the time, is that we look at the sequelae, we look at the symptom, we look at the thing that happens second, and we go, oh, that's the problem, right? So we don't want to look at what is the root cause, because that's where the issue of change needs to happen. What is the root cause of this problem? The root cause of this problem is white nationalism. That's why the kid was there. What happens next is just a result, a karmic result of all of that. And so it's very hard, though, for us to look at that basic root cause. And again, this is what the spiritual life does. It really helps us to try to look at the root causes of our disorder, of our malformation. And to me, that's what we're really called to do.
And that applies to what happened last night in Minneapolis. So even if you take the full narrative at face value that this man apparently shot someone else running from the police, and the police caught up with him and he kills himself, and then people who don't know the full story, or maybe some people did, start protesting, a lot of people are saying, oh my God, here, this invalidates everything that BLM is about. Like, no, it doesn't. I can still say F the police for all that. Like, the fact that we have zero trust, that a man would probably feel like it's safer to kill himself than wait for the police to do it for him. Like, there's all kinds of things that are wrong, and we can't trust the police. Like, people protested, the police escalate like always. And then meanwhile, like, some local leadership and activists showed up and shared the video and asked folks to kind of step back a bit. And so a couple of people just showing up was able to de-escalate, but the entire police force only escalated it. So this is all symptoms of the deeper problem. And it is not, as one person I saw saying, oh, these people are opportunists looking for any reason to loot. BS. People are sitting around like, man, I can't wait for the next looting opportunity to show up. I mean, maybe some people, but that's not what drives this stuff at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple, I guess, last comments.
A couple last comments before we hit the road.
Diagnose that shit, Dan.
Thanks, Julia.
CK writes, can you talk about why they can sacrifice us, but we have to be peaceful? You know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Katie writes, loss of our heritage, understanding our histories, family culture means lack of identity. So property, possessions, jobs fill the gap to define our identities. It's a hyperfluidity of capitalism. It's what it does. It has to uproot us so that we can become cogs in the machine. And then we feel this deep sense of anxiety about feeling placeless. So that we keep going back to Moloch here. Lack of identity also means we are susceptible to manipulative, strong leaders who seem to have all the answers. Same reason people like conspiracy theories is the same reason they like authoritarian leaders, is it cuts through the crap and gives something they can grab a hold of. So much, yes, Katie. Julia's agreeing with you. Jeremy writes, my conservative contacts say the liberals only say the kid just randomly shot people without cause. They then give a bit more context showing that he was attacked. But clearly they are doing the same thing as well, not telling the whole story. Yes, I would hope that the crowd would be containing the shooter, as you state. I mean, he went there picking a fight. It's pretty clear. Someone requested a link to the Kenosha vigilante killings. This Vice article has a couple videos that show the first shooting and later when some people try to chase Kyle Rittenhouse down. And there's a link there. I mean, I don't want.
All right, we're way out of time.
Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse sounds like a name for a white nationalist. I'm just going to say
it does. It sadly kind of does.
It sounds really kind of Nazi-ish.
Yeah, kind of like Nikki Haley.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's not her real name.
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for hanging with us. I think I won the pumpkin spice vote. So I'm excited about that. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with Gus.
Yeah, Gus will be with us tomorrow.
So
see you all then.
And we'll see you then.